Hey guys, so I know that you've been talking about Abraham and his story, and today we're continuing his story. But first I want to review one thing that I think is really important for today's story. So way back in Genesis, earlier in Genesis, the book, God promised Abraham that he would make him a nation and make his name great. And basically what that means is that God promised Abraham that he would give him lots and lots and lots of children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren and great-great-great-great-great-grandchildren, lots and lots of family, bless him with lots of descendants. And descendants are just family members who come after us. So God promised that to Abraham, and you know that when God makes a promise, he's going to keep it. And so this story is a continuation and a partial fulfillment of that promise that God made to Abraham earlier. So we start this story off. Abraham calls over his oldest and best servant, and kind of like his right-hand man. And the Bible doesn't name this servant, so for the lesson we're just going to call him the servant, Abraham's servant, okay? So Abraham calls the servant over and he says, hey, I need you to do something for me. I need you to go way back to our homeland, to my homeland, and find Isaac a wife. But she needs to come here. She needs to come back here with you, because I don't want my son Isaac going all the way back there to my homeland, because God gave us this land. God gave us this land that we're on, and we need to stay here because it's God's gift to us. So basically, in shorter terms, what Abraham was asking was he was asking his servant to go find a young woman for Abraham, his son Isaac, to marry. So Abraham is asking his servant to go find his future daughter-in-law. And that's crazy because that's a big ask. He's asking his boss to go find a future family member. But the servant says, okay, I'll do it, but I have a question. And Abraham's like, what's that? And he says, what do I do if she says no? Like, what if I find a young woman for Isaac to marry, but she won't come with me? Let's say maybe she had family or maybe she had friends. Like, what if she won't come with me back here? And then Abraham said, then you don't need to worry about it. He was like, if she won't come, then don't even worry about it. It's not your problem anymore. But don't let Isaac leave this land, because it's God's gift to us and we need to stay here. And so the servant says, okay. And he loads everything up and he brings a couple other servants with him and he brings a few camels and he goes and he treks all the way back to Abraham's homeland. And he comes upon this city, right? And he sees the city and there's a well outside of it. And he stops at this well with lots of water and he prays and he says, God, if you're supposed to send someone to me for Isaac to marry, please send her here. And when I ask her for water, if she offers it to both me and my camels that I brought with me, then I'll know that she is the one who you want Isaac to marry. But if not, if she only offers water to me or doesn't offer me any water at all, then I'll know that she's not the one. And as soon as he's done stop praying, a young woman comes to the well and he approaches her and he says, ma'am, can I have some water? And she says, sure, and let me get some water for your camels too. And immediately, that's the fulfillment of the prayer. And her name is Rebecca. This young woman, Rebecca, came as soon as the servant stopped praying and fulfilled his prayer. And Rebecca was the woman that God wants Isaac to marry, because she offered water to the servant and his camels. And that's amazing how Rebecca came right after he was done praying. And so he says, wow, and he explains everything, and he's like, my boss sent me to find someone for his son. And I think that, I believe that God is telling me that you, Rebecca, are the person for Isaac. And he gives her lots of gifts, and he starts bestowing lots of pretty gifts onto her and gives them to her. And she takes him home back to her household. And, she had a brother named Laban. And Laban comes out and says, who are you? And he sees all the pretty gifts and everything. And he's like, oh, come on in. We've got plenty of room. And so Abraham's servant goes in, and he has dinner with Rebecca and Laban's family. And he says, look, I am here because my boss Abraham sent me here to find a wife for his son Isaac. And I believe that your daughter and your sister Rebecca is the woman for Isaac to marry. And he told the whole story. He told about how, Abraham and Sarah had Isaac when they were, when biologically they were supposed to be too old to have a baby. God gave them a baby. He explained all the miracles and everything surrounding Abraham and Isaac's lives. And he says, I truly believe that Rebecca is the woman that I'm supposed to bring back home for Isaac to marry. And the family thinks about it for a little bit, and they're like, wow, this really does sound like God. And if it is God, which we think it is, then we can't say anything either way. And basically what they meant was that it's not our business to interfere with God's plan or to stop it or hinder it in any way. And they say, but, we're willing to let her go back with you, but we need to hear that she is willing to do that first. So they call her over and they say, do you want to go with this young man back to marry Isaac? And she says, yes, I want to go. And that's amazing how God used Abraham's servant and sent him across this vast land, right? And the first young woman that he met was the young woman for Isaac that Isaac was supposed to marry. And that was God's plan for Isaac to have Rebecca. And so Abraham's servant brought Rebecca back home, and she married Isaac. And that's just amazing how God fulfilled that. And he fulfilled his promise. This is a continuation of his fulfilling his promise to Abraham to give him lots and lots of children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren. And next week, I believe you guys are going to be learning about Jacob and Esau, who are two of Isaac and Rebekah's sons. But before we go, I've got a little song that I think goes with the theme of this lesson. And I think the theme is that God always keeps his promises, because he promised Abraham that he would give him all of these family and descendants and everything, and he did. And he found a wife for Isaac and did whatever he needed to do to get her back to be with Isaac. And his plan was amazing in that way. And I think that this song goes along with the theme. Long ago, God promised Abraham that he'd make his name great and give him a nation. Though it took some time and a good bit of grit, he didn't fret, 'cause God doesn't forget, and he always keeps his promises. Our God always keeps his promises. Our God always keeps his promises. Oh, who he was is who he is, and it's who he'll always be. 'Cause God always keeps his promises. So if God has made you a promise, then you can believe that you'll receive it, 'cause he's unchangeable and unbendable, completely, truly, fully, deeply dependable. Our God always keeps his promises. Our God always keeps his promises. Oh, who he was is who he is, and it's who he'll always